Hello and welcome to another video review. This is Delta Force for PC. This is the first entry into the acclaimed Delta Force franchise, which spawned, of course, several sequels, and up into today, actually. There's one supposed to be coming out this year called Delta Force Angel Falls, but we haven't had much info on that yet. Anyway, this was the first entry into the franchise, and it was pretty well praised at the time, which was 1998. And it marked a different kind of shooter than the typical stuff of the era, which was the Quake 2 style, where you just kind of run and gun, blast everything, lots of explosions, lots of gibs, that sort of thing. That was pretty much the common thing of the era. And Delta Force marked a different sort of shooter because it was more realistic. And, I mean, you had stuff like Rainbow Six and Rogue Spear at the time, but it wasn't quite like this, where it's still a first-person shooter more than anything else, not necessarily a tactical game. And it did get quite a bit of praise for something that I'll talk about in a minute. But let's go ahead and talk about the graphics, which are fairly typical of the era. Now, unlike most games of that era, they actually have ridiculously long draw distances. So you can see for a very, very far way away. And that was really cool at the time. We hadn't really seen much like that before. And so it really opened up the avenue for a lot of long-range combat as opposed to the really cramped corridors in most of the shooters of the time. I mean, they weren't necessarily cramped corridors, but they were fairly cramped levels, especially compared to this. This is wide open environments that you could just run around in, completing the objectives and that sort of thing. And at the time, the graphics were pretty good, but they really, really haven't aged well. By today's standards, these are horrendous. Everything is ridiculously pixelated. It's actually pretty hard to make stuff out in some cases. Now, granted, it does look pretty standard for a game from around 1998, especially with something as wide draw distance as this has. It's pretty remarkable. But animations are absolutely pathetic. I mean, you don't even see the first-person weapons move except for when they're shooting. You just see a little bit of recoil, and that's it. You don't see reloading animations or anything. It's basically a static image that keeps moving back and forth. It's like a JPEG or something. It's kind of weird. But the 3D models, which are the enemy characters and then, of course, the maps, for the time they were pretty well done. I mean, they were obviously really blocky and the textures are really bad. But at the time, it was pretty good. Now, of course, again, it hasn't aged well, so modern players might not really appreciate that very much. And then, of course, there was the sound design, which was pretty average at the time, and it still actually isn't too bad today. Gun sounds sound perfectly fine. The voice acting works pretty well. I mean, it's not bad, it's not good. It's just kind of there. It does its job, and it doesn't really need to do anything else. There really isn't much music. There's some in the menu, but that's it. And so it really doesn't play much part in the game. Because when you're in the actual in-game, it doesn't play any music at all. You just run around and complete your objectives in basically total silence. It's kind of doing the whole realism thing. And so you end up having these long expanses of just nothing. And it kind of gets you into the vibe of, hey, I'm kind of out here all alone, rather than, you know, I'm just rocking through this whole thing, blasting everything to bits. So that actually does help with the atmosphere just a little bit. Now, while I can't really say anything about a storyline for this game since there really isn't one, they do have campaigns. There are several campaigns that are available to you, and they're basically categorized on which country they're in. And they are composed of different missions that have multiple objectives. They don't necessarily have the objective of go in, slaughter everything. Now, for the most part, you'll be going in to complete an objective. Maybe you'll be destroying a target. Maybe you'll be taking a prisoner or recovering some intelligence or something of that nature. You can do a lot of different things. I mean, you can rescue hostages and everything. So the mission variety is pretty high, but the gear variety is not. I mean, you have one machine gun, which is the M249 SAW. You have the MP5 submachine gun, which is suppressed, and that's really your only option in stealthy encounters. You also have one assault rifle, which is the M4, and it has a grenade launcher attached to it, and a scope. you also get 2 different sniper rifles. You have the, I believe it's the M40A3 and the Barrett M82 50 caliber. I mean, that's your primary weapon selection in a nutshell. That's all you can get. And I mean, they each have their own characteristics, of course, but it really doesn't matter one way or the other, because I'll get to that in a minute. And as for pistols, you only get 2. You get the high standard 22 suppressed, or you get the Colt 45, which is the M1911. And really, you're going to be choosing what your gear is based on what mission it is. So the 3rd gear slot is open to whatever you need for the mission. I mean, it can be an anti-tank missile launcher, it can be a satchel charge, or some extra ammo, something like that. But your gear selection is very limited, but it really doesn't matter in the long run, except for what gear you choose as related to stealth mission or assault mission, and that's really it. That's all you need to know. Because engagements tend to take place over very long distances. I mean, they have massive, massive draw distances. Now, granted, it does get hard to notice things at long range, unless they're shooting at you, which for some reason they can see you from very long way away and shoot at you. Granted, they're not going to hit much, but anyway. So what ends up happening is you either choose a submachine gun for the stealth missions, or you choose the sniper rifles. And it really doesn't matter which weapon you have, because unless you're using the submachine gun or the 22 pistol, it's a one-hit kill no matter where you hit them. So, I mean, you could shoot somebody in the foot and they'll drop dead, unless you're using the submachine gun or the 22 pistol. But that also lends to the game being a little bit more realistic. You also have bullet drop that you need to worry about. So if you're sniping, for instance, and you're firing at a very long range, then you're actually going to have to worry about bullet drop. So that kind of reminds me of Battlefield, but still, this was long before Battlefield. So and since I'd played this before Battlefield, I kind of knew about that. But anyway, so Battlefield fans will feel kind of at home with the sniping in this because you have the bullet drop, and so they'll kind of like that. But really, the missions get very tedious after a while, just because the gear selection is so limited. Because the game is just so tedious after a while, because you have very, very long distances where you need to travel, and you also have generally the same mission objectives over and over and over again. I mean, they are varied, but still, it does get kind of tedious, because you end up having, there's that one guy that you need to kill because he's in, you can't see him and he's driving you nuts and all that stuff. So overall, I'd say Delta Force is a good game for people who are interested in this particular genre, the more realistic military shooters. If you're interested in that, then I would say check it out for the historical value, but the modern gamer is not going to have fun with this at all. I mean, you really have to have a lot of patience with it, and you really have to be into military shooters to really actually like it, because it is pretty easy in the long run, but still. Ultimately, Delta Force is a good piece of history. It's good to check out how military shooters were back in the early days in the late 90s, and it's also remarkable for its rendering technique, but other than that, it's really nothing all that special. It's not that fun. So if you're looking for a good piece of history to at least look at and see how games were at the time, check it out. But if you're looking for a game that's about fun, then I would say avoid this one.